It's either the fifth or the sixth in the series that I've been doing called Global Views of COVID-19. This one is the perspective from Rwanda. And you can see there, this is the map from yesterday. And the reported cases in Rwanda are 154. And maybe our speakers will talk a little bit about that, whether they think that number is right. So just to do a quick intro for everyone here, my name is Shane Carter. I'm the program coordinator at this office at UC Berkeley called Arias. I do K-12 programs I do programs for K-12 teachers and for community college instructors on behalf of the area studies centers on campus, which means basically every part of the world except for the US, Canada, and Oceania. And that's just based on which ones are exist on campus and are funded. So today, I've been doing this series to help teachers sort of understand and contextualize what's happening right now in a global sense, rather than just the experience that each of us is having locally. And so this session today is focused on Rwanda, which is in East Central Africa. And so we are going to have a talk with two speakers, both talking on experiencing the pandemic and lockdown in Rwanda, some personal reflections and effects on biodiversity conservation. Then after the talk, we'll do a Q&A. Between the two of them, they'll talk for about 30 minutes. Then we'll do a Q&A. You are welcome to put questions in the chat box during the presentation, but I'll also give a couple of minutes right at the end so that you can take a moment to add some. And then if you would please stay on at the end, I have just a quick closing poll, which would be very helpful for you to do, for me, if you do it. And then at the end of the slideshow, if I show that, we have more resources, but I also will include a follow-up email that has everything in it. Okay, so we're gonna start. I'm gonna manage the slides while the speakers talk, so you're gonna still see my screen. The first speaker, I'm just going to give you a moment to read, is Dr. Beth Kaplin. Let me take 30 seconds of silence so you can read. So I reached out to Beth. I was talking to a friend of mine from high school who is the person that we know in common. So this was not a connection through the university per se. And I was talking to her about this program, and I said, I'd really like to find a person who can talk from somewhere on the African continent. And I thought, ideally, it would be interesting to know how a place that had already experienced dealing with another pandemic, in this case, Ebola, or being close to it, how they might have approached this the same or differently from us. And so that was how I came to invite Beth. And so, Dr. Kaplin, I want you to take it away from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings, and I always like to start out by saying I really appreciate people coming and listening and sort of acting like everything is normal while we're in this very strange time that I think we'll look back on with a lot of interesting memories and thoughts. And thank you, Shane, for inviting me to do this. And I'm really excited to talk to you in the United States about this. And I have my colleague Venuste with me. We work together here at University of Rwanda in the Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Natural Resource Management. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how Rwanda is experiencing COVID-19. And I just wanted to show briefly a map of the country of Rwanda, so that mainly you can see in the north is Uganda, and surrounded by Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Burundi in the south. And Shane mentioned Ebola, and mainly that is along the border with Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda in the north. So I want to start by saying that Rwanda is a very interesting country to be living in now. I would say that it's a country of contrasts. It's considered the darling of the continent of Africa. It's been called Little Singapore. It has one of the fastest economic growth rates. It is striving to become a middle-income country, to really shift out of the lowest economic level. And it is a very proactive country in terms of environmental laws. It has outlawed the use of single-use plastic, and we outlawed plastic bag use here a number of years ago. And the picture on the lower left shows this beautiful scenery. Rwanda is really targeting high-end tourism, so different from the archetypal view of, say, Tanzania or Kenya. These safaris, which backpackers can do here, they're really targeting people who helicopter in and pay a lot of money per night to stay in very expensive places. They're trying to protect the small amount of biodiversity they have in this way by targeting this very high end. And then the lower right shows that contrast with also about 90% of the population living subsistence lifestyle. So growing food, living day to day, and growing everything they eat. Yeah, and the economy of Rwanda is driven by tea in the upper left and coffee in the lower right, and then tourism is a very large part of the revenue generation for the country, and especially mountain gorillas, which I think most of you know from Gorillas in the Mist. And they've also been developing other types of tourism activities, like in the upper right is a canopy walkway. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about, yeah, you can go next slide, about being in the lockdown. So one thing I want to say, this is just a capture of an image of what we get on a daily basis here in Rwanda from the Ministry of Health. So that is who we hear from here in the country. We get our information from the Ministry of Health, and they tell us all the details. And it somehow is kind of calming. We get the number of cases, and we get the number of active cases. And then they also talk about the tracking that they've done. So it's really a feeling that there's some control here. And the next slide shows that we also get daily updates. For example, me as an expat living here, I get not daily, I think weekly updates. We were getting daily when there were some final flights going in and out. But they just tell us, information. And, I think expats here are really grateful for the embassies that have been giving that kind of information. And I do have to say personally, when the country decided to go on lockdown here, meaning there were no more flights, and then eventually we were not allowed to leave our districts, and police are checking when you do go out and want to know where you're going. There was a little bit of a feeling of, close to panic, maybe saying, am I doing the right thing by, staying here? And partly I had just fractured a rib, so I couldn't, a day before I think the lockdown started, so I couldn't really move easily anyway. So I really had to logic it out that, well, there was no way I was going to drive all the way up to the capital city, get to the airport, and then sit on a plane for 20-something hours with this kind of pain. And so it was an easy decision. Actually, lockdown is really easy when you have a fractured rib. Yeah, it wasn't that easy to move around anyway. So I want to show you a little bit about what the country has been doing, and my colleague Venuste is going to tell you a little bit more. But first of all, these hand washing stations came out really quickly. I live in what's called a secondary city, so it's outside of the capital city of Kigali, and it's not quite as built up and I could say fancy as the capital city. But we have these hand washing stations you can see on the lower left. You can use your foot to pedal the water, and also your elbow to turn the water on and off, so you actually don't have to touch anything. And there are these hand sanitizer bottles that security guards are squeezing into your hand everywhere you go. So it's very organized. And one thing I want to say about this hand washing stations and all of the sanitizer, I was talking to some colleagues about it who are in the healthcare profession, and we think that probably Rwanda was very prepared for this because of the Ebola outbreak, and that happened a couple of years ago, and even more recently. I think they had stockpiled a lot of these materials because they just appeared really fast and very organized in getting them out into the city centers and towns, and then also models, and so that there could be homemade structures like this. And On the right-hand side is also this tape that was put out in front of shops and in a barrier, so we don't enter the shop. And we're supposed to stand, 2 meters apart from each other. So we're supposed to stand in those grids and tell what we want, so we don't actually go into any of the shops anymore. And again, it's all very organized in that way. And on the left-hand side, I had to go in. There's very few shops open now, only essential shops. So I had to go into a shop to pay a bill, and we pay it through, I'm going to talk about in a moment, through what's called mobile money. Everything is done on a cell phone. And at one moment, the man managing the shop stood up, this man in that orange t-shirt there, and he checked the temperature of everyone working in the shop, and then also himself, and he had a little notebook that he was recording it on. So I was really impressed with how, very organized they are. I mean, there's been 0 cases in Butare, in this town where I live, but they're still extremely vigilant. And this slide is showing in the upper left-hand corner is a statement from the mobile money, MTN, the company that does mobile money. So you can put money on your cell phone, and then you can distribute it to people through the cell phone. And I haven't lived in the United States in a while, so I don't know if you can do that so easily. I know there's something like that starts with a V that you can do with money like that, but it's so easy here to pay bills, to send people money. And mainly this slide is showing that another thing that the lockdown has done is caused a lot of hardship for people who do live day to day. So there's a lot of people that make a living by transporting goods, whether it's charcoal or food, carrying things, and selling things in the market, and they're just not making their regular wage. And so we've been getting a lot of requests to help people. And then the other thing in the lower right-hand corner was to remind myself that Rwanda is a very community and family-oriented society, and people really do help each other and work to support each other. And the country is organized at the smallest level into villages or units, umadugudus, and so people have been helping each other within the umadugudus. People will raise money and then help vulnerable households. And then also what I found really interesting is senior leaders in the government were asked to forego 1 month's salary and pool all that money, and then also identified vulnerable communities that would be supported through that money as well. And then I wanted to show you again about, I'm just so impressed with how we can do all this stuff by phone, because I think this is the future. This is really what COVID-19 and this pandemic is teaching us. And Rwanda, I think a lot of countries in Africa are really ahead of the curve. And that little Airtel, it's another cell phone company, and they're already, this was not because of COVID-19, but they're pushing going cashless, and Rwanda's been talking about that for a while. So I have on the left my car. I had my insurance expired a couple of weeks ago during this lockdown, and I panicked a little bit, like, how am I going to do that? But it was so easy. I just did it through the phone, mobile money, and I sent it to the account number they had given me, and then I got through the phone the evidence that I had paid the insurance. And then on the right is the water meter. I had to pay the water bill, and the government was very efficient at telling everybody how they should do that. And I followed the instructions. It was super easy. And within about 2 minutes, the fellow on the other end of the line here in my town sent me back an acknowledgement that he had gotten the payment and my next bill, because I had to take a picture of the meter for him, so they're no longer coming to the house. And again, I think that's what's going to happen in the future. So I also wanted to mention about how I'm here in a secondary city where, you know, we have access to really beautiful fruits and vegetables at the local market, and that's really wonderful. But I, for better or worse, I'm on this Facebook group of expats in Kigali, the capital city. So those people up there are always showing these photos of, I got takeout at this fancy restaurant, and they're getting all this amazing food. And there are no restaurants down here, and I think anywhere outside of Kigali, that are doing takeaway, maybe up in the north where the mountain gorilla tourism is located. But I just put that image on the lower right just to show you an example of, I think very quickly, a lot of restaurants, which often many of them really have a mandate to like hire women, hire special needs people. So they're really trying to stay open, and a lot of the community is really trying to support them. And on the left-hand side is something I did with somebody in Kigali who runs a farmer market. And I worked with her to get some people together here in my town where I live to put in an order. And we got the order into a UNHCR vehicle and got it down here. So I was so excited to get cherry tomatoes, which we never get down here, and homemade bagels, and these kind of mushrooms that I wasn't able to get here. So just another example of, how we're dealing with it here. But also I think these are innovations that are, transporting food, which we can call locally grown, but getting it where it needs to go. I think those systems are really going to start developing a lot more. And then one of the last things I want to say is about the healthcare system. I think one of the reasons that the government of Rwanda has been so very strict about dealing with this pandemic, with strict, I mean, it's a stay at home. We really aren't allowed to go out and walk and do sport outside of our homes. We can only go out for essential purposes. But I believe that in part it's because hospital systems here could not handle a lot of people getting really, really ill. And we don't have the equipment here for that. We don't have the emergency system rooms set up for that. The government is very organized about testing and tracking people that are coming in. All the cases, I think, have come in from out of the country. People who are traveling, and then they're put into a camp setting and taken care of there. And now there's been a lot of success where people have been already released, recovered and released. But I mean, if it started happening out in some of these more rural sites, I think that would really be a big problem. It's very well organized in the capital city, which is really the place where it's happening. All the borders are closed. So, maybe there's still some border traffic going on, but essentially the incoming when it was happening was in the capital city. And one of the last things I want to mention is that this pandemic and the stay-at-home order came during the time of the genocide against the Tutsi memorial period, which is always a very somber and difficult time. And it was really interesting to read comments about this from people that, some people I think had cherished being together with family and in the different ceremonies that were going on across the country. For example, our University of Rwanda had events at every campus memorializing and remembering, and that had to do with students doing poetry and dance and song and music, and this kind of thing was happening all across the country in different units and villages, and that I think has been a difficult thing for people to have to be doing this in isolation. And I wanted to mention one other thing that I recently found out. It's kind of a cascading impact of COVID-19. On the left-hand side is what's called an imbabula. It's a clay made oven, and it's what a lot of people cook on here, and you can see that there's charcoal in there. And I bought one for the guard that works at my house here, because he had been cooking like that with 3 stones and wood that he would collect on the lower right hand side. And it's more efficient to use the charcoal, and also I was concerned about where that wood was coming from. So charcoal, at least we could track like where the charcoal was being made. But now I noticed he was using those 3 stone for cooking again. And I asked why, and he said that the price of charcoal has doubled and people are just getting wood now. And I think sometimes scrounging wood. I think we're going to see an impact on local woodlots and on a lot of trees that when you look at them out in the neighborhood, they're kind of like these scrawny things now, just a straight stem with no branches left because people are just cutting every branch they can get. So this is, I think there's a lot more impacts like this happening that, we haven't even thought about yet, cascading impacts of the stay-at-home order and the impacts of the pandemic. Yeah, I just briefly want to mention how we're working in my center now. On the left side shows I made masks for people because now we have an order that we have to wear masks, and I knew my staff would have a hard time finding them. So I had some scrap fabric, and I supported a local seamstress to make them. And then on the right, we were using different social media like Zoom and WebEx and Team and some other things. It's been really interesting to learn how to use all these different platforms for our staff meetings and regular meetings at the college. And then impacts on wildlife and conservation. I think you all know about the mountain gorillas here. They're a main stay for conservation, but the impacts of COVID-19 are two-way. One is up on the upper left. There's been so many pictures of this going around. These lions aren't dead, they're just taking back space, and they're just hanging out on a road because there's no vehicles and no tourists. But on the lower right, there's been some spikes in poaching, and poaching that has a big impact, like on elephants and rhino and carnivores. So, and that's because there's been less presence in the parks of tourists and just having to keep people out there to hold off the poaching. So it's been a sort of dual-sided impact. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I told you that tourism is very, very important in the country, and now there's just simply no tourists coming here, and that's going to have a huge impact. Hotels are closed. On the lower left are community guides. These are young people that come from around villages around the national parks, and I don't know if they're still being paid, but they're certainly not getting, the tips and other support they get from the tourism. And on the lower right is a women's cooperative. There's many, many of these artisan cooperatives here, and they also rely on tourists who buy their products, whether it's embroidery products or baskets. So that's also deeply affected, livelihoods of people by loss of tourism. And then that's what I wanted to tell you, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Venuste in Nsengimana. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. So everyone, I want you to take just a moment to read the intro and the information here about Nsengimana Venuste, and he is going to talk to you the second part of the presentation. And I want to thank Beth also for brokering this conversation, because I reached out to Beth, like I said, through my high school friend, and Beth reached out to her colleague, Venuste.
Okay, thank you, Shen. Thank you, colleagues, for the invitation. And I'm really very happy to be with you and give you a short presentation about the education here in Rwanda. Now you have the picture of the country system. So in education, we have almost 3-4 different levels. As you saw in the pictures, we have the nursery. These are the kids of between from 3 and 6 years old. Then primary schools from 6 to 12 years. Then secondary education, 3 years after. Then the university level. That's how the levels of education are organized here in the country. So coming back to the historical background of education, so we shifted from the knowledge-based curriculum to the competence-based curriculum, where the country wants to be a red country economy, basing on the skills got from students from all levels. So the situation changed somehow with the COVID-19, and the schools adapted differently, but most of cases there were introduction of washing hands, as is on the picture. But the students should not stay at school because, as you know, there are many, especially for those who are in boarding schools. And the government decided that all students have to go back home from nursery, primary, secondary, and university. So this was well organized by the government because it avails the vehicles for all students. No any parent had to pay any money. Everything was covered by the government. So as you see on the picture, all the students were back home, and the parents took praise when the students came at home. But from the schools to the homes, everything was covered by the government. Now, there was a process to help students at home, even though they're not at school, but learning doesn't stop. All courses are now online. For example, the screen you see in front of it is for the primary and secondary education. And the website is managed by Rwanda Education Board. And as you see, the courses are in categories for primary, for secondary, and all the courses are available online. Then it was not stopped for secondary and primary schools only. It was also organized for the university level. All the courses were prepared and put online. The students were enrolled and they have access on those courses. They can follow the courses being at home, but they might have the internet connection. Okay, so this is the platform. I have selected one of the College of Education. As you see, they are different schools, the School of Education, School of Inclusive and Special Needs Education, African Centers. And this is organized for the whole colleges. This is an example of the College of Education, but the University of Rwanda is made by 6 different colleges. So every college had to put online the courses they are teaching by different levels, by different schools and departments. And then the lecturers have to load the content and the students have access on those courses. It is a platform where they can chat with teachers online. If they have questions, if they have challenges the content, they can post the questions and then the teacher can react online and give the feedback to the students. So it is a well-organized process for the university, but also for primary and secondary education. So the situation here in Rwanda might be different from yours. Beyond of the content available online, especially for primary and secondary education, the courses are also delivered on radio, on television. As you see the kid with the radio and the notebook, that's how they follow some courses on the radio. And they are prepared, there is a timetable they have to follow. So the Rwanda Education Board announces the timetable to all parents and to all students. So they follow the timetable. They know if they're in primary one, our courses of Kinyarwanda or mathematics, for example, will take place on Wednesday at 8 a.m. For those who are in P5, they know that maybe English course will take place at this given period of time. So depending on the materials that they have at home, either television or radio, they follow the course online. It is available. As you see now on the left side, there is also the screen of a smartphone. Not only for smartphone, any kind of the phone they have, they can deal 1, 3, 4, and then they have the quizzes, the evaluation. That's why they get the exercise and the quizzes in relation with the courses they have got online, on radio, on a website, or on television. That's how it is working. So this is very important because all the people do not have the same level of means. Some can have radio, but they don't have television. Others can have access to the internet. So the students will follow the course online depending on the availability of the materials they have at home, either radio, telephone, mobile phone, or the internet. That's how it is organized. Now, some of the challenges is food availability. In Rwanda, there is an improvement in agricultural sector on the market, but as you know, all the people are not moving at the same step. So now some parents are challenged by feeding students at home. And in Africa, we have sometimes a large family. If you have 3 students which are now at home, they're doing anything because it is a lockdown period. So some families are challenged to get food. I have put these pictures to show you that the most of the food we are getting is coming from agriculture. That is the main activity generating food. But there is also another culture of sharing. For those who don't have anything to eat, you find that the neighbors are helping, availing some food, which is really good. But it is a challenge because not all families are able to get food. Okay, some of the other challenges, as I talked about it, you may find some families which may not have the radio or mobile phone or TV, but now something good is that they try whatever they have. The challenge is that they can't move from home and join the neighbors who have maybe the mobile phone television screen. And as you know, we run more when we are seeing what is taking place. So on radio, they're only listening, but they don't see what is taking place. If it is an example, an experiment which is conducted by teachers, they can't see how it is done. So that is a gap between students following courses on radio and those following courses on television. But anyway, instead of having nothing, they use what they have. So the lack of internet is another challenge, especially in remote areas where they don't have access to the internet and they don't have money to buy it. But anyway, they use the radio as the raw materials they can have access on. Another big school fund from everything from the government. For this one, private schools, they start to terminate contracts with teachers because if the lockdown period is continuous, they will not get money to pay the teachers and the lecturers. As you know, the source of the fund for all of them is coming from the parents. So as the students are not as at the school, there is no school fees, there is no any income from parents. So they started to terminate the contracts of some teachers. But the situation is not alarmant. It's not too much. You find maybe 1, 2 schools in one district or in one province. So it is not yet a big problem, but it is started. And if it continues, it might be a problem for some teachers. And it might be also a problem for the schools when they open, because they will no longer have a contract with teachers. And then the schools will open and students might be at school without having lecturers and teachers. I think this is what I had to share with you. If there is any problem, question, you are welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it. So I want to give everyone a couple of moments to write their questions in. I saw, Anne, you commented to me specifically, you were curious about more information on biodiversity conservation also. So definitely put that type of question in your question box if you want to, but I just want to give you a few minutes here to add your questions, and then I will communicate them to the speakers. Okay, so I'm going to start with the ones that I have, but you guys should feel free to keep adding ones and I'll keep an eye on it. The first two are pretty simple and straightforward ones, and this is for either of the two of you, Venuste or Beth. So either one of you feel free to jump in. One is just a very simple one, which is how many RWF to $1? Because you had some prices there and people were wondering.
Yeah, Rwandan francs. So it's almost 1-to-1. It's like $1 is about 900, 950, 960 Rwandan francs.
Okay, got it. And then
the border is closed. The two borders, Goma in the north and in the south at Bukavu, are both closed. Only like lorries with products can cross, but no other crossing.
Got it. Thank you. This question was one I was wondering as I was listening to you speaking. I think this is for Venuste. Were the primary and secondary courses created by the Ministry of Education? In other words, were individual classroom teachers, did they have any responsibility for creating or helping deliver those lessons, or was this entirely centralized?
Okay, thank you. Maybe I have to start from the first one. do most students have internet and computer access throughout the country and in various economic situations? The answer is no. Not all of them have access to the internet, but they have the way of working each other. If one of students manage to get the internet and go online, has the ability to download the courses. And once they are downloaded, they can be shared through WhatsApp. And then, you know, the money spent on WhatsApp is not the same as the money spent on the website. That's the one of the ways they are using. So if they don't, some of them have computer laptops. As you know, the government of Rwanda started the program of one laptop a child. So the laptops were given to students for free and they pay in installments. So most of the students have the laptops at home as they are at home now during the lockdown period. But the challenge is about the internet. And I explained how they work together. Some who have internet can download the course. The second one is, the answer is no. Teachers now at home. Teachers are the one preparing the lessons. And once they are ready, they are shared with the district education officers. I was explaining how the courses are available. So teachers are the one to prepare the courses, and then they work together with Rwanda Education Board. Then Rwanda Education Board have the access on the platform. So it is the one to avail the courses on the website, but it is not the one to prepare the lessons. I think that is clear, that they work together with teachers. That is the, I can't have access.
Let me ask a follow-up question to that I think gets at that. So when a student is listening to a lesson on the radio, who's preparing and delivering that lesson? Because it's probably not their individual teacher, right?
Yeah, so it is an organized activity. There are the teachers who are preparing the lessons, and there are some other teachers who used to go on the radio following the given timetable, and then they give those courses.
Okay.
And they are passing at the same time on the radio and on television. So depending on the materials available for students, they can either follow the courses on the radio or on television at the same time. So everything is done by teachers, but it is coordinated by the government.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So I want to, I'm going to jump forward to a question that addresses a topic that we haven't talked about yet, and then I'm going to come back again to the education questions, because I know there was some questions about this. So this is for both of you, I think. It says, I'm curious also what you think about the various Western quote unquote articles that are claiming that without tourism, conservation in the country is likely to be compromised. My colleagues are wondering the extent to which this just reaffirms a neo-colonial narrative, or what your thoughts are.
I can mention something and then Venuste may jump in, but I would say that the government of Rwanda has intentionally embraced tourism. I don't think they see it as a neo-colonialism construct. And there's really a movement here which is called the business of conservation, trying to make conservation as a business. I personally am not a fan of that, and I think that would be a whole nother webinar. But the fact is that we probably wouldn't have the habitat of the mountain gorilla without the tourism that started in the late 70s, early 80s. It was developed by some people who had been studying the mountain gorillas and came up with the idea that tourism could be a way to promote conservation and protect that landscape. Rwanda is a really tiny country. It has the highest human population density of any country on the continent. And, you know, a lot of people are living subsistence in poverty, hand to mouth. And tourism, the way it's managed here, is an attempt to link conservation with improving livelihoods. And they're doing that through revenue sharing programs. So a proportion of the revenue from tourism is shared with communities that live around the park. And there's a lot of other activities that are supported through tourism, both in types of community development, in hiring of park guards and park guides. The fact is that a lot of countries don't have the revenue to support protection of biodiversity, and as it's currently run. There are a lot of different models to do that, but right now, when we pull out tourism, I think it would depend on how long that's going to happen. And I think there's a couple of other confounding issues. One is that pretty likely great apes can get COVID-19. So we need protection and conservation and attention to communities around the park and how the animals are moving to make sure that that contact is reduced. And the other thing is that poaching has been shown to be increasing in some parks in countries in Africa, as well as other places around the world. And that's especially high value poaching, animals that are of high value. So again, without the network of conservation areas and the network of people that are protecting, it's a big issue. Now there's a big discussion about the militarization of conservation, and that's also a very complicated issue. And yeah, it's a very difficult issue. I think some of you might see soon the news that just happened, that there was an attack at Virunga, outside of Virunga National Park, which is connected to Volcanoes National Park in DR Congo, and I think 17 people were killed. It was not an attack on the park. It was an attack on the park guards. It was an attack on the community near the park, but park guards were driving by when it happened and were in the crossfire. So it's another, issue where it's going to start bringing up questions about how militarized conservation should be. I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but as a conservation biologist, we are losing species every day. There was just a species that went extinct a few days ago, an ungulate. I can't remember the country it's from, but I mean, it's happening all the time. So I think we'd really have to figure this out quickly.
Thank you. And I'm gonna, I see that you're in the chat there and you had some questions for Beth. So maybe as we get a little farther in, if she has some time, she can follow up with that, but I wanna come back to address some of the other questions. Okay, so to get back to a little earlier topic, so these are two kind of related ones. One is the government enacting programs to address some of the issues with the cascading effects? And then the second one, which I think is related, is I'd like more information on how subsistence farmers, that 90% of the population you talked about, are dealing with not being able to market or purchase products, both, I guess. It says the majority still need to buy some products. Is the lockdown a particularly large hardship for them?
I can mention something about the cascading effect. And I think it's, as I mentioned when I first started talking, maybe Venuste has some other examples for this, but I know the government has announced that the top leaders would give a month of their salary, and that would target vulnerable communities. I don't know the parameters they use to select the vulnerable communities. Maybe Venuste knows more. But I think that's a big step for a government to do as a commitment to help communities. And then there's been a lot of messages I've seen about at the smaller scale around villages just coming together, as Venuste mentioned, to help each other. And I think that is how some of these cascading impacts will be dealt with. But I think, it's all happened so fast that I'm not sure. I mean, I think data are going to start coming out, documenting where this is really happening, where prices have gone up, because definitely prices have gone up, and that's going to be a hardship. And for the subsistence farmers, the markets are still open and people are still buying. But again, I don't know the details of who actually is being impacted by that, because you do see still bikes moving, carrying, large kilos and kilo bags full of potatoes and produce and everything. So there's, people are still having food and buying it, but some people aren't having the income, who are the very small business owners who are considered maybe, not essential. But Venuste, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, let me start from the one how they know the vulnerable people have problems with lockdown time. Yeah, I am living in the boundaries of secondary city in Muhanga. It is a semi-town and semi-village. So how we work together with the local leaders. They are the one to communicate. They know the rest of the people in need. And the communication is done through the mobile phone. We'll have the WhatsApp group for the majority of the people living in the village. And then we share the information. They say we have maybe 20 people in need of food. Then we contribute to say, I can get 1,000, another one can get 500, another one can get rice, another one can get beans. Then we collect them together. Even for the money, we use it to buy food. And then you can get maybe 5 sacks of rice, can get 2 sacks of beans. Then we put them together. Then we share those people who are in need of something to eat. That is one way. There is another way that we really know the poor people who are living nearby our families. I personally, I know those who are living in 5 of them. So it is coordinated somehow by the local leaders, and the communication is done through the mobile phones, through message sharing or through WhatsApp group, or it is also done by the people by themselves, knowing the people living nearby, having the problem of getting food. That's how it is coordinated. And also there are some of the activities which were not stopped, even though we are in a lockdown period. People are allowed to move. Maybe it is hard because they're moving on food, but they have access to the market. They can go and buy some food they want, such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, Irish potatoes, tomatoes. They can buy them on the market. The market are not closed, but they open on the controlled way, so that people they maintain a distance of 1 meter between one another. And also there is this washing stations, the market. When you go there, you have to wash your hands, you have to take the mask. So it is controlled, but they still have access on the market. Another activity which is not closed is the farming activities. We are still allowed to go in the farms for agriculture, for farming. So if you have potatoes in the field, you can go and harvest them. That's another way we can get food. That's what I have to say maybe on that one. Then coming on, okay, as I told you, I'm not in town. I'm in a semi-village and semi-town. Sometimes the internet is not good. I'm sorry, it is cutting off sometimes.
That's okay.
Maybe Beth is like is living in town.
I am.
I want
On a
to.
dirt
So here
road.
sometimes it is cutting off. So I was going on the other question about education, which was asking how the government is managing the fast and quick preparation of the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So as I told you, it is also organized that even though we are in lockdown and we stay at home, but we still working at home. We are using internet, even though mine is not fine, but it is not always like this. So we keep on working. So the lesson are shared by teachers, and it is controlled biology in senior one. Then Beth, you prepare your biology in senior two. So the courses are shared in that way. And then every teacher has to submit a prepared lesson, and is submitted to the district education officer, who is in touch with Rwanda Education Board. And then, as I said before, Rwanda Education Board has access on the website. It is the one to post all those courses. In addition, all the teaching materials, I mean the books for students and teachers, are available online. So anytime they can be downloaded, or they can be read online. They are available there. Then other teachers, they have access to those lesson plans. They can deliver the courses online. And then the government is intervening, for example, for transport, for facilitation to move from home to the television office, to the radio stations. That's how it is organized. So maybe you fail to understand, but it is working. And it is very faster that I prepare a lesson in the morning. At 10, it is available at the district level. Midday, it is on Rwanda Education Board. It is posted on the website. Then the timetable is moving on. So it is well coordinated and well organized, and it is very successful in our country. It works successfully.
I think what you're hearing from the teachers here is envy, because there is less organization, I think, at least on any large scale level. I'm going to answer one of the questions briefly, and then give it to you to do the rest. And then the last, we're a little bit over, but if you guys don't mind staying another 5 minutes, I think we can finish out the questions, which would be great. To my understanding, yes, there is a national school curriculum in Rwanda. So is it true that all students in a grade level are learning the same thing at the same time? We don't have a national curriculum. We have state curricula, but even there, what is happening in one classroom and another can be very different. So that's a question.
Oh, thank you very much. For us, we have one curriculum. As I said, we shifted from knowledge-based curriculum to competence-based curriculum. So the country is using one curriculum. And then at the beginning of the school year, all the teachers, they develop to call the scheme of work. And that scheme of work is determining the lesson depending on the school calendar. They're saying from January, I will be teaching this and this. The first week, and if it is biology, for example, the first week I will be teaching introduction to biology. The second week, I will be teaching maybe cell, animal cell. The third week, I will be teaching the plant cell. So things are organized like that. So everywhere they have in the whole country, they have the scheme of work they follow.
Yeah.
So that if it is the lesson 10 in the country, and all schools are at the lesson 10. So they are following the same lesson.
Got it.
Unless there has been some problems, maybe the teacher has been sick, that is a challenge. They delayed for one lesson, two lessons. But in general, all students are following the same lesson because they have the same curriculum and they have the same scheme of work. That's how it is organized. And that's what they try to follow during this lockdown period. For the university, we have each module has the module description. And that module description is clear that it will be taught maybe in term 1, term 2, or term 3. We have 3 terms for the university. So now we faced the COVID-19 while we're in term 2. So all the modules in term 2 are known, and they're the one loaded and available on the platforms. So it is one module. There, the students, they are moving on their own step because it is one module per term. The faster can finish before others. The slow runners it will take more time. But at the end of the term, all of them, they cover the same and one module for the university level.
Got it.
Thank you.
But I wanted to mention something about that. Going fully online like that is very new. So we are at the university. I think, Venuste, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that the primary and secondary is actually more organized than at the university. And at the university, we are quite struggling to get among all the different colleges, everything online. And somebody asked the question, do all students have internet access and computers? But at the university even, many lecturers don't have their own computers, or they don't have access to the internet, let alone the students who now are back home, some in very remote villages. So the access is not as smooth as it may seem. And I think some of you who are instructors, the challenge it is to suddenly have to teach fully online. So, some people were talking about the social justice of that because there's not equal access among students. And we recently had a letter from our vice chancellor saying that when this ends, as Venuste said, we're in trimester 2, we will pick up where we left off essentially and finish trimester 2 teaching, not assuming that all the students learned everything online by themselves, because lecturers and students don't have equal access. So I thought that was a really interesting acknowledgement. My sense was in the beginning of this lockdown, there was a feeling that we're going to do this, we're going to get everything online, and we're going to do all the teaching online and not get behind. But I think it quickly became a reality that that couldn't happen. And it is really impressive how primary and secondary educators and that system got up to speed quite quickly.
I was saying that at the primary and secondary level, they are well organized than the university, because as you know, at the university, there are so many challenges, but we know the new system always has advantages and disadvantages. But I agree with her that primary and secondary schools are well organized than the university level. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And I think that's I'm seeing the same thing here in some ways. So one of the questions that was left was, I work in the Congo, and one of the main issues during the Ebola virus was combating rumors about the virus. Are there similar concerns in Rwanda with COVID?
Venuste, do you want to?
I think they are somehow different. They are somehow different because for COVID-19, it seems as the Rwanda government was well organized and prepared in advance. Why for Ebola, I don't know the case because it doesn't happen in our country. It was in the neighboring country, the Republic Democratic of Congo. And they maybe the government organization is not the same. But what I see is that the government of Rwanda, in face of COVID-19, was well prepared in advance. The people were sensitized, and the measures when were taken, they were followed by all teachers. So unless Beth has something about Ebola, I don't have any information about Ebola. I'm sorry about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can also say that, it's a very controlled society here. And I think it makes it more difficult for rumors like that to go spreading rampantly, for better or worse. We don't have that kind of media here, and things are shut down pretty quickly if it looks like it's getting out of control like that. So yeah, that's the contrast in the type of societies we have.
Great, thank you. And then does your gender, male versus female, influence your access to education in Rwanda?
Sorry?
Does gender, do male students have more access to education than girl students? Is there a difference?
Any contribution, Beth?
Well, I think you probably know the statistics better, especially primary and secondary, because Venuste is in education. But one comment I can make working at the university level is, and I especially maybe look at it more of the lens of women in science, and I've worked with some groups that have worked with how to get more women into science here. So we're talking about young women coming into the university, and there is a big issue here which is very similar to the US, with women's roles and men's roles. And women have the burden of taking care of family members, and because families are, in the US, I know mostly you don't expect your child to live at home when they're at the university, for example, or to come back and live at home usually. But here families are much more close-knit, and the girls are expected to take care of families. So if there's something that happens, they're often the ones that would have to go back to the home. And then there's also an issue of pregnancy, unwanted pregnancies. And I am aware of many young women who become pregnant, and that really affects their ability to finish school or do as well as they could. And so that's another issue as well. And yeah, so some of those issues I think are similar to what we experience in the US. And I think maybe because some people like to say it's African culture, but I don't believe it is. I think we're just maybe have a little few years ahead in terms of just, you know, saying no to women's roles being defined in the kitchen. But even in the US, I've had grad students, females, who have really struggled with, should I have children or should I be at school? So I'm talking more at, you know, the university level, but I think Venuste has more of the experience at primary and secondary with female access to school.
Okay, thank you, Beth. About the primary and secondary education, around 2010, Rwanda introduced the education for all. Both boys and girls have access to primary and secondary education. So you have primary education, you have 9-year basic education, 12-year basic education, and all those levels, the students have access to school and they study for free. The government is paying everything. So what the parents have to do is only searching basic materials such as the uniform, the notebooks, but the remaining such as money, school fees, books, internet, um, computers, everything is covered by the government. So gender issue is not a problem in primary and secondary education. They both girls and boys have access to basic education. So there are those challenges that Professor Beth have been talking about, those unwanted pregnancies. And as you know, all the parents do not have the same understanding at the same time. You may find that there's some dropout in some schools where some students may go back at home for some familiar activities. But in general, the statistics are indicating that both girls and boys have access to basic education. The percentage of dropout is very, very small. For example, last year, if I remember the statistics very well, it was around 1%, which is a small number compared to the past years. And then after the exams, the primary exams, to go in ordinary level, and after ordinary level, going to upper secondary education, there is a way of promoting education for girls. For example, there is a way of giving them chance. If for boys to go in secondary school is, for example, 20 marks, for girls it might be maybe 25. So there is a way of helping them to continue to be strengthened to join the school. So there are different strategies put in place by the government.
Thank you. I want to, we had one very straightforward question that was about, do all schools have internet access? And that's going to be our final one, because we could ask a million questions.
Yeah, the quick feedback answer is no.
Okay.
Not all schools have the internet. Not all schools have the electricity. No, it is not possible.
Okay.
But where is possible, the government is trying to do whatever possible way to avail the solar energy, for example, to avail the internet for some schools where it is possible. But as you know, there's some schools located in remote areas. That is one way. But when we talk about the internet, we have to be careful because there is the internet available on mobile phone. And that one can be used on the internet. It can be connected on laptops. That's one way of the internet. When I answer no, I'm talking about this strong internet available where the school can be connected wherever you are. You have the Wi-Fi and you can have free internet. But where it is not available, there is also the way of using the internet on the mobile phone, like the one I am using now. I'm not using the router, I'm using my phone. Maybe it is why it is not a strong internet. But anyway, it is available in some schools. It depends on which kind of internet we are talking about. If we're talking about the internet, we have router, we have cables, it is not available in all schools. but this internet by using the mobile phone can be available in most of schools.
Okay.
The problem, the challenge is the money to buy the bundles. So it depends on how the school is organized.
Okay, I want to ask more questions, but I'm not going to. And so instead, I'm just going to say thank you to both of you. I really appreciate it. Those of you who were on, I hope you found out some new things that you didn't know, both about the virus, and it turned out that we just started talking about Rwanda by the end. We sort of deviated. But thank you both to Beth and Venuste and to all of you who were on. It looks
Thank
like
you
everyone
all.
who's on did the poll, so
Thank you.
thanks.